Okay, so now that the dust has settled a little bit when it comes to the Browns and all this craziness going on, right? We have not had a trade in like a week. I feel like we could actually talk about the football aspect of this whole situation, which is phenomenal, right? And when we talk about Deshaun Watson and what does he bring to the Cleveland Browns offense and how the moves that Andrew Berry has made has changed how hard it is to play the Cleveland Browns. I don't think those things can be understated because they're phenomenal factors, right? Let's start with what we do know, right? The defensive side of the game, right? We know that that's always going to be something that was difficult to stop when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, just because they have guys that you can't really train for, right? Ain't much you could do in a game plan about Myles Garrett, especially like if you're a regular team. If you have a really good offensive line with some really good tight ends, you might be able to do something with Myles Garrett. But other than that, he is so flexible, so bendy, so rangy as an athlete at that position. I mean, he's literally a generational athlete at edge rusher. Like in 10 years, somebody going to come into the draft and we're going to be like, is he as good as Myles Garrett was or as athletic as Myles Garrett was? Because he is just a different level of athlete. He has the speed, strength, and the bend especially makes him just an incredibly different athlete at that position. And then you look over, maybe you could bring back Jadeveon Clowney. Hopefully you can get back Jadeveon Clowney. Hopefully you can get a defensive tackle in the draft. If you get those two things settled, you're going to be all right on the defensive line. And then let's talk about JOK, because JOK quietly was one of the best linebackers in all of football last year. He was excellent against the run. He was really good against the pass. He's really good as a blitzer, right? He's athletic and he's versatile. And I know people harp on his size more so than I think is actually warranted, because he is not even that small. Yeah, he's like 6 foot, 225, but that's about what a normal linebacker is. Like the days of like the strictly 6'2", 240 linebacker who's really in there to bust something, you know what I mean, where it comes downhill and just run into a lineman. That really doesn't happen anymore, right? We have more athletic defensive tackles now that fill that role. So now what we need is somebody who could float cover and cover tight ends, athletic tight ends, because these tight ends have gotten way more athletic, and somebody who could just single gap, right? Just get to one gap and fill it up, and maybe you're athletic enough to get to the second gap. But we don't need these linebackers who used to just be what you would call a thumper, right? Where you just dump into the offensive line to free up the blitzer. That's not really what we live in anymore in the NFL, because again, the range of athletes on the defensive line has just changed to the point where you don't require that anymore to get pressure there. And if you have more athletic linebackers, you don't really have to just rely on thumper lanes to get things open or to get linebackers to gaps. So now that that's being phased out, JOK is a good size at linebacker, right? We have seen him go toe-to-toe with guards. We have seen him go toe-to-toe with linebackers, go toe-to-toe with tight ends and running backs. He's able to hit the hole. He's able to run defend pretty well. He probably needs to be a more consistent tackler. Sometimes he overruns his ability to tackle, which is the issue. But other than that, he really has no other issues there, and he's such a dynamic piece that if you do have two good enough interior linemen, you do have Jadeveon Clowney, which hopefully you can bring back, and you have Myles Garrett, you can defend run and pass with 5 players. Now, once you get to that level where you can defend run and pass with 5 players in the box, you're pretty much unstoppable as a defense. I mean, we're talking about some of the best defenses of all time were able to do that. If you want to think about the defenses that were able to go and achieve that much, think about the San Francisco 49ers in 2019. Almost won a Super Bowl off the strength of just being able to put 5 in the box and being fine whether you run or pass. That's where the Browns could be at if they play their cards right when it comes to fixing this defensive line. Well, not fixing, but adding to this defensive line. And they already got JOK. They can do whatever with any other option they got there. They're pretty fine with the linebacking depth, right? I like Anthony Walker. I like having Sione Takitaki still on the roster, and I like Jacob Phillips, so I think you're fine there at linebacker. Also, if we let's look at the safeties and the DBs. You have a lot of them, right? You have Denzel Ward, who's a shutdown corner. I think Greg Newsom's going to take a jump here. He was already good last year. If he doesn't improve a single bit, he's still going to be really good for his number 2 corner. But if he does, he's going to be a pretty great number 2 corner. You have Troy Hill, who I think is one of the better nickel DBs in the league. Really good as a blitzer if you need to do that, and especially if you have the situation the Browns could have where they can really handle everything with 5 in the box. A nickel blitzer is going to be really helpful, because then what you going to do, right? If you're worried about double teams on the line, how are you going to handle the delayed blitz from Troy Hill, who's really good at those delayed blitzes. Also, really good defender at the nickel. And then you have A.J. Green III, who can step in there and add some depth. You have guys like that who are going to be real helpful. Maybe I think they were able to keep Javonte Moffitt. I'm not 100% sure if they were. Somebody let me know in the comment section, but you're able to keep him. He showed some promise when he played last year. And then Richie LeCounte, maybe he gets some playing time. But then you also have Grant Delpit over top. And then you're going to have John Johnson as well over top. And I think Moffitt could be that guy who could float in between and take over Ronnie Harrison's role. And who knows, Ronnie Harrison might come back at a lower number because it's not like a lot of people are knocking on his door right now. So just defensively alone, you look at this team, you look at how hard they are to stop on the defensive end if they just get a couple of things right in the draft, and then you see where the Browns could be a problem with, right? I was never down, even throughout the whole Baker Mayfield drama, will we have a quarterback, will we not? I was never down on this team's ability to win a decent amount of games this year just because I felt like the defense would be at a high level. Now that the real question mark has seemed to be answered in some ways, right? It's not definitive yet. There's still some things that they have to go out there and prove on the football field. But since that seems to be handled, and here's what I mean by handled is the Browns' issue last year offensively was at the end of the day, teams only game plan for one thing when they played the Cleveland Browns offense. Right? They weren't game planning for Baker Mayfield. Well, they were game planning for Baker Mayfield, but they weren't afraid of Baker Mayfield. They weren't afraid of any of the wide receivers. They weren't afraid of anything but Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. That's the only thing teams felt like that they could not allow the Browns to beat them with was that run game. And when that's the case, they stacked the box against the Browns, right? They put 8 in there. Sometimes you saw 9 in there. Even the Chargers put 7 in the box, right? And the Chargers usually don't even have Chargers barely have 5 guys in the box. They even put 7 in there, right? So when you were playing the Browns offensively, it was a real easy task because if you are not afraid of the quarterback, if you are not afraid of the passing attack in any way, shape, or form, you're going to be able to stop the run, right? And that's what happened. The Browns got the run stopped on them a lot, and there was really nothing much else the Browns could do to it because they didn't have a counterpunch. The quarterback play was bad. The wide receiver play was up and down, and that really kind of fueled into a lot of the other issues that the Browns offense had. Now, things change a little bit, right? Because not only do you obviously improve your passing game by getting Amari Cooper, and I'll go into why he's important here too, but also by getting Deshaun Watson. But I think the underrated element of this whole thing is with Deshaun Watson, you add a third dimension to the run game. Now, a lot of you guys who watch me during the year will know I used to jokingly, semi-jokingly say, hey, at this point, the Browns passing offense has been so mediocre that the Browns should really consider going to a triple option. Now, a lot of people were like, haha, that's funny, or were wondering why I would think that. The reason I would think that, right, is if you ran a triple option, you add a third dimension to the run game that makes it so that even if a team just keys in and worries about the run, makes it harder to just stop the run, right? If you have a third dimension to that run game. That's why I was always for the Browns getting a more mobile quarterback, just in case with the whole Baker Mayfield situation, because I felt like adding that third dimension to your run game really could help you even if the pass is not working, right? Because if teams are going to key in on your run game, you could at least be three-dimensional in your run game. So now teams have to worry about either Chubb or Hunt getting the ball, right? And then they have to worry about the ball being pulled out because let's not forget Deshaun Watson, one of the things he's really good at is RPOs. So now they have to worry about that ball being pulled out and ran the other direction or thrown, right? Like they have to worry about a lot of things. It's not just simple to defend the Browns. And when you are an incredibly difficult team to game plan against for teams on the offensive side and the defensive side, then you start to see where you're going to be a really good football team. You give teams headaches all over the place. You exhaust their resources before the game even starts. And then you make their job a lot more complicated, right? The more complicated it is to defend you, the better you're going to be and the easier it's going to be to win football games because that's where the Browns are right now. So when you look at this, right, the Browns could pull the ball out at the point of attack and run the other way. Now, if you think it's hard to stop the Browns running the football, and you have 8 in the box already, which it is hard to stop the Browns to run the football when you have 8 in the box. That's why some teams do go to 9, right? Then imagine how hard it is when you might have 8. You're probably going to have 6. Maybe on a delayed blitz, you'll have an extra guy in there. And you might even have to expend one of your players, especially if you're in man coverage, as a spy. Think about that, right? Because you might have to spy Deshaun Watson, right? So I'm not even talking about any specific passing concepts. I'm just talking about basic football, right? Now you're talking about a situation where you might get 6 in the box, and one of those dudes might be dedicated to your QB. So to make sure that they don't, take the backside of a run play and then go off for 40, right? So now all of a sudden, instead of Nick Chubb and the offensive line fighting 9 people, right, to try to get 10 yards, all of a sudden it's Nick Chubb and the offensive line and maybe a fullback or maybe a pulling tight end or a pulling guard versus 6 or 7 people at most, right? Probably 6. And when that is the case, all of a sudden everybody's life gets easier, right? When you play the Cleveland Browns, you're going to have to make a decision. Do I feel like I'm elite in the box enough to live with 7 or less and stop the run with the Cleveland Browns? Like, do you think you're that elite defensively that you can live with 7 in the box and not worry about losing the round? Also, do you know that you're elite enough in the back end to where having 7 in the box is not going to kill you in the passing game? Are you at that point as a defense? Not a lot of defenses are. Or are you at the other ilk where you're like, hey, I just don't want to get killed with big plays. I'll let them run the ball. And if you let the Browns run the ball, you're playing right into the Browns' identity, right? They're going to smother you on the offensive side of the ball with the run, and they'll just choke you out on the defensive end, right? So now all of a sudden you're playing into identity. Either way, it's a hand that you don't want to be dealt. You have to hope for a bad game from the quarterback or hope for an uncharacteristically bad game from an offensive line standpoint in order to really have a game plan that's favorable for you. It makes you incredibly difficult. And I ain't even talked about Amari Cooper yet, right? And here's the thing that Amari Cooper brings to the Browns that the Browns have not had in a very long time. For the first time in forever, the Browns' best route runner is also their fastest wide receiver. Now, I know Anthony Schwartz is faster than Amari Cooper, but I'm talking about game speed, right? I ain't never seen Anthony Schwartz look as fast as he did in the 40 in pads, right? When I see Amari Cooper run a 4.4 at his size, oh yeah, he's running a 4.4 and he's fast, right? He's kind of like Nick Chubb, where he got that speed that you don't expect because he's so thick built. But that's what Amari Cooper is. Your best wide receiver is also a deep threat. And not just a deep threat, he's the best route runner you have, right? Imagine if Jarvis Landry, instead of having 4.75 speed or 4.77 speed, he had 4.5 speed or 4.4 speed. That'd change the game, right? Odell was a faster wide receiver and a more dynamic wide receiver, but Jarvis Landry was always a more reliable wide receiver because he was a better route runner. The situation now is that your best route runner is a more physical wide receiver who's more reliable and runs better routes, right? He's not as dynamic of an athlete that Odell was, but he is definitely a better route runner and a more precise route runner. So now that you have that situation, you have that kind of a guy that can improvise and run clean routes with the quarterback that people are going to fear, right? People go into the game plan, hey, I don't want Deshaun Watson to beat us, but I also don't want Nick Chubb to beat you. What you going to do? What you gonna do about that, right? Even when it's Jacoby Brissett in there, the mere presence of Amari Cooper being the Browns' best route runner and the fastest receiver on the team, being somebody you have to respect, is gonna open up the box because, yeah, it might not be out of respect for Jacoby Brissett, but it's probably gonna be out of respect for Amari Cooper being able to get open downfield. You're still not gonna want to get beat by that. Even that is gonna help the Browns, right? And Jacoby Brissett is not fast. He runs like a 5-flat 40, but he's a good enough and capable enough runner to add, I would say, a quarter dimension to the run game. He ain't gonna make that thing 3-dimensional, but he'll make it a quarter dimensional, 2.25 dimensional, right? 2 and 2.5D. And that's fine enough, right? That's fine enough to beat a lot of teams. And again, this is why when you look at the Cleveland Browns on paper, and hopefully when you look at them on tape, you see a team that is going to give teams headaches, right? And we can talk about how good the Bengals are, but the Bengals give you headaches in the passing game And that's about it, right? Defensively, you worry about them. They're a very solid defense, but they don't really make you stressed on defense as much as that offense does, right? When we talk about the Ravens are a major, major headache on the offensive side because they have so many dimensions to that run game. And on the defensive side, they're a good defensive team, but they don't really provide that many like game-changing, mind-breaking matchups that really stress you defensively. The Browns are one of like 3 teams that can do that on both sides of the ball. So yeah, when you see people get excited about this team, it's not simply because of an upgrade at quarterback, even though that has a lot to do with it. It's about everything else that this team has had around it. And hopefully this is finally the year that they live up to their potential. But this is why people are really, really excited about what the Browns have done in this offseason and why that means that this Browns team might be the most successful in franchise history. But that's my thoughts on it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.